Hi, this is Dan Heisman, and we're here with another video on YouTube to help you improve your chess play. We're going to do something we haven't done too much in our series, which is I'm going to do a quick overview of one of my books. Obviously, I'm going to try to pick the best ones I can to overview for you. And I picked a book that I think is really unique in the chess literature. There's probably like 100,000 or more chess books. And I like to write unique books. I mean, one of my books, Back to Basics Tactics, is not that unique, but I like to think the other ones are pretty unique. In any case, this is one of them, and it's called The Improving Chess Thinker. Well, you can't quite tell from the cover or from the name exactly what it is, but what it is kind of an overview of me giving the DeGroote Think Out Loud thought process exercise to people of all levels over the last, I hate to say it, half a century. I'm that old. Anyway, I bought DeGroote's book, I guess right before I went to college, and I read it. DeGroote wrote a book called Thought and Choice in Chess. Actually, it wasn't a book, it was his PhD thesis. And what he did was he took a bunch of interesting positions from his games. I'll show you one of them in a few minutes. And he gave them to strong players. In fact, the AVRO tournament was being held there in the Netherlands in 1938, and he was able to get some of the top players like Paul Carrez, Max Euwe, Alexander Alyakin to look at the positions from his games, and he had I guess they didn't have a tape recorder in those days, they probably had a stenographer recording what people said as they thought out loud and found a move out loud for him. And then he wrote a PhD thesis on how good players find chess moves in games, which is a lot different than finding a move in a puzzle where you're given a certain requirement. In a puzzle, the requirement is, white to play and win, or white to play and mate in 3, or white to play and draw, or something like that. In a game, it's not like that. In a game, you have a certain amount of time on your clock, and you have to play so many moves in that much time, and you have to find the best moves that you can in that amount of time. So the player who's doing the move, when you're playing a game, has to figure out your own requirements. Like, what am I really looking for here? What's my goal? I'm trying to find the best move I can in a reasonable amount of time, but in this particular position, what are the kind of things that I'm trying to do? So I've been giving these DeGroote exercises to people for pretty much my entire career, and the last 25 years I've been a full-time chess instructor, and giving people DeGrootes as part of their chess lessons is one of the things that I do. And I listen to them think, and then we talk about it. So in this, I got the idea for having a book where you would take people from the rating of about 700 or 800 all the way up through International Master, and I would have a chapter for each level. A chapter for people rated, let's say, under 1,000, another chapter 1,000 to 1,200, another chapter 1,200 to 1,400. I'll show my table of contents in a minute. And I would give, 12, 15 examples of people at that level, how they thought about some of these DeGroote exercises, some of these DeGroote positions. And I came up with 6 positions. I used a couple from DeGroote, and I used a few that were from my own experience, from some of my students' games. And the only difference between a DeGroote position and a position in a game is you could have a position in a game where it's kind of dull or there's only one forced move. And a DeGroote position, you want to give somebody some meat, so you want to give them analytical positions so they have something to think about. And again, we'll look at the DeGroote A position in a minute. So that's what I did. I have given this DeGroote exercise to probably over 1,000 people. And again, I took a sample of, maybe 15% of those in the book, and I showed the protocols. A protocol is the written description of everything that they said during that time. It's not just a summary, it's the entire thing that they said before they said, this is the move that I'm going to play. So you give the entire protocol. As far as I know, there's only 3 books that really give entire protocols as the book content. One is Thought and Choice in Chess, of course, by DeGroote. One is the book you're looking at right here, The Improving Chess Thinker. And the third one is Inside the Chess Mind by Jacob Agard, where he sort of did a DeGroote kind of thing. He didn't, do all the extra work, of how people think in general, but he gave interesting, in fact, almost 2 interesting positions to very strong players and showed it in the book Inside the Chess Mind. So that's a good book too. Those are the three. If you compare them to books that have other things on thought process, for instance, Inside the Amateur's Mind, there Jeremy Silman gives people positions, but he asks them specific questions about the positions, like, what do you think White's plan should be, or what would you do here? And he doesn't say, you're at a tournament, you've got lots of time on your clock, I'm going to write down everything you say. He just, usually when he gives the excerpt in Inside the Chess Mind, he's just giving a paragraph of what somebody said about an aspect of the position. He doesn't really give entire protocols. So his book, Inside the Amateur's Mind, In the Amateur's Mind, by Jeremy Silman, is a really good book. It's not quite the same as the DeGroot kind of books, like mine is, but it's certainly in that same class of books. All right, so let's take a look at the table of contents here. I think I have it on this. Is it over here? Over here. Okay. Let me bring this down so you can see it. Okay, I think you can see most of it here. All right. So I was nice enough to get a forward by Grandmaster Lev Albert. And then I have the acknowledgments, the preface, the introduction. All right, so then I talk about the exercise. What exercise am I talking about? I'm talking about the DeGroot exercise. What is it to give people a DeGroot? What kind of instructions do I give them? Pretend you're in a slow game. Please use algebraic notation. Don't show off for the exercise. What does that mean, don't show off for the exercise? It means if you normally play fast, then you're going to do it relatively fast. If you're a slow player, you're going to do it relatively slow. I also tell people it'll take about twice as long to do a DeGroot as it would to find a move in a real game in a tournament, because you're thinking out loud and nobody can talk as fast as they can think. Some people are pretty good at it. But in general, I've seen over the years, it slows people down by about a 2-to-1 time ratio. So if you would normally take 5 minutes to find a move at the World Open, then if you're looking at the same position and doing a DeGroot in an exercise, it might take you about 10 minutes to do the exact same thing. All right, Chapter 2 is Thought Process Basics. We've had a lot of videos on that here on my YouTube channel. But basically, what are some of the basic things that you need to go through in a thought process? And then I give my next 7 chapters are the ascending order of students doing the DeGroot exercise for me. And I picked out 6 different DeGroots that I would use for the book. In the exercise section, I give the 6, or maybe it's in the introduction, I give the 6. But every person in the book is then going to be doing one of those 6. And I'm going to show their entire protocol, meaning you're playing a slow game. I want you to find a move for me. Don't show off for the exercise. Think out loud. And then they think out loud for me till they find the move. And then they say, this is my move. I'm going to hit the clock. That tells me that they're done. And I'm writing down as fast as I can what they say. And so Chapter 3 is a bunch of examples, let's say 12 to 20 examples of people in Class F, which is below 1,000, like 800 to 1,000, doing this. Chapter 4 is 200 points higher, Class E, and so on. Class D people, 1,200 to 1,400 is Chapter 5. 1,400 to 1,600 is Chapter 6. 1,600 to 1,800, Chapter 7, Chapter 8, 1,800 to 2,000. Chapter 9 is people over 2,000, all the way up to International Master Greg Shahade, who did one of my more interesting positions for me and did a very interesting job there. So we have people from roughly rating around 800 all the way up to 2,500 plus doing the DeGroot exercise. What I tell people to do is, suppose you're taking lessons from me or you buy this book, and you want to try to use the chapter where the people are doing the exercise. What you want to do is either read all the chapters up to your level, or if you want to skip the chapters too far below your level, let's say you're Class C. All right, you might want to read the people in Class F, E, or D, or if you want to skip F or E, you can. But read the people in Class D, see what they do, see what my comments are, see what the general comments about people that level are. Then read Class C. See what your peers do, read what they do, And then read Class B. What do people that are 200 points above you generally think when they're trying to find a move? What do they do that you don't do that makes them better than you, that you need to be able to do or do better so that you can get up those 200 points? And then I tell people, you probably want to skip the people way above you because you're not going to learn as much from doing those levels. If you want to read them for interest, fine, but I would wait till you get to be a stronger player to see what the next people are, because if you're like in Class E and you're reading what experts do and you try to copy that, it's not going to work. It's sort of like, you're learning math and you're learning how to multiply, and someone says, well, maybe you should read some really advanced math to help you. Here's a calculus book. Well, that's not exactly what helps you the most. Is that analogy perfect? Of course not, but it's that kind of thing. All right, so after we have the chapters on each level, chapter 10, I do the thinking cap. This is new for the second edition of the book. I wrote a series of articles on thought process for Jeremy Silman's website about 15, 18 years ago. And after a while, Jeremy stopped using them, but he had the rights to them. So I went back to Jeremy and I said, excuse me, Jeremy, but I'm writing a book on thought process, and I'd like to use those thinking cap articles that I wrote for you, but I would like your permission, of course. So Jeremy Silman said, of course, Dan, you could do that. So I said, thanks. And that's what Chapter 10 is. It's all the articles I wrote on thought process for Jeremy's website. Chapter 11, as you see, is the basics of time management. I talk about both micro time management and macro time management. Micro time management is involved with criticality assessment and also your clock management, meaning you're trying to spend more time on critical moves, less time on non-critical moves. You're trying to make moves at about the rate that you need to make for getting through the whole game. Macro time management is how you manage the whole game. Can you play your entire move in the time allotted without A, having a lot of time left on your clock at the end, which means, assuming the game was competitive and went all the way to the end, that you could have spent more time and done better? Or B, you play too slow and then you get into what I call unnecessary time pressure. Unnecessary time pressure is avoidable time pressure, where instead of taking 5 minutes to figure out where to develop your bishop on move 3 on the game or move 4, you take 30 or 40 seconds to get some judgment on that, and you make the move rather than trying to figure everything out when nothing really is at stake. And then later on in the game, when it gets really complicated and really critical, then you don't have enough time to think, and then you're in time pressure and you make fast moves and you throw away the game. So that's unnecessary time pressure. It's possible to have regular time pressure if you're a good player and you're playing another good player and you end up with a very critical game early in the game, and the game stays critical the whole game. It's possible that you could get into time trouble, which would be very justifiable and make sense given that you weren't aware that at the start of the game it was going to be that critical all through the game. And when it does, unfortunately, human beings don't have enough time that they want to think as much as they need to on every move when the moves are all that critical throughout the game. And then you get into time trouble, and that happens occasionally to good players, even if they're practicing good time management. All right, Chapter 12 is what the researcher learned. Well, I did this for all that amount of time, and I've listened to all these people do things, and the question is, what did I learn, or if you're giving this to a friend of yours, what could you learn from watching other people do all these DeGroote protocols? All right, my appendices. Appendix A is Max Uwa's protocol of DeGroote A. I'm going to show you DeGroote A as soon as we're done with the table of contents here. And finally, in Appendix B, at the time I wrote the book, I took the computer and I did computer analysis of the 6 positions that I use in the book, which is sort of a truth table, so to speak, which shows, if you're rated 3,500, well, maybe the computers were only 3,300 when I wrote the book. If you're rated 32 or 3,300, which moves would you play and what would be the best sequences and why aren't the sequences that were mentioned by the players, why don't they work, that kind of thing. Sort of a truth of the actual positions. Finally, I have a glossary which shows you what are some of the terms that we use in our thought process. Like if I create the term hope chess, do I mean everything you hope for when you're playing chess? No, I have a specific idea of what I mean if the person's playing hope chess, or if they're hand waving, or if they're playing chess backward, or whatever the glossary thing happens to be. It could be something that I use in the book, or it could be something that's very commonly used, but a lot of people don't understand it, maybe criticality assessment, things like that. And finally, a bibliography, other books like the ones we just talked about, de Groot's Thought and Choice in Chess. I even give Jeremy Silman's Endgame course, not because it has anything to do with thought process, but because it's also laid out in this way. Jeremy Silman's Endgame course has, what are the things you should know when you're, under 800 to play endgames? What do you need to know from 800 to 1,000? What do you need to know from 1,000 to 1,200? So his book came out before my book, and I thought that was a good way to arrange my thought process book. So in a sense, that is a reference book, Jeremy Silman's Endgame course, at least just for the structure of the book. All right, let's take a look at de Groot A. Pull that up. All right, so when de Groot was giving his positions to these grandmasters and some people a little below grandmaster, he didn't give it to the kind of average players that I gave it to, which is one reason why my book's unique. In de Groot's book, it's almost all strong players. In Agard's book, it is all strong players. And in my book, there's a sprinkling of very strong players at the end, but I try to show you how you think at all different levels, so that if you're trying to become a better chess player, let me make the window smaller here so you can see it a little better. All right, we're going to shrink the window, put it right into the middle of the board, just to make everything a little bit nicer here for you. All right, there we go. We'll bring it into here. All right, so I got the board centered now. All right, so de Groot decided, he didn't want to give puzzle kind of positions to people. He didn't want to give play and win positions. Those people, even if you didn't tell someone it's play and win, and you give them a play and win, a good player is going to figure that out pretty quickly, like, oh, this is like a puzzle. So you don't want that. You want meaty positions where there's actual different candidate moves to be chosen from. You could have a position where there's one clearly best move, like there is in a puzzle, but you might have a position from a game where there's 5 moves that are almost all equally good, and it's not that critical which one you choose, but how do you go about figuring out which ones they are and which one you're actually going to play? So in a real game, you don't have those kind of one move kind of is the best or one move kind of wins issues. So de Groot picked out what he thought were meaty, interesting positions from his games that he thought that the good players would have some fun, looking at, and that would give him some good information for his thesis. So this was the most popular one. This is called de Groot A, and I'm not going to analyze it for you. If you'd like to stop the video and analyze it yourself, you can. And if you buy de Groot's book or you buy my book, of course, you can see how other people analyzed it. And, that's interesting. But if you look at the position, it's a position where the players are just about finishing the opening. Why do I say they're just about finishing the opening? Because the opening is the part of the game where you activate all your pieces, and both sides have not really activated the rooks that they castled with. All the other pieces have been activated. And in this position, it's white's move, and de Groot gave this position to all those strong players, and he said, think out loud for me, I'll record what you're saying, and, tell me what you would play, and, the players figured it out. So I use this position too, and just for the fun of it, let's go to somewhere in the middle, maybe let's do class D, and we'll get someone thinking about de Groot A in class D. All right, so let's see here. Just looking through quickly to find a de Groot A in class D. De Groot A. All right. And I'll read you what he said, and then I'll read you my comments. So what I do in the book is I give the entire protocol, and then I make some brief comments about that particular protocol, and then at the end of the chapter I try to get some commonality between what people were doing at that level and what they need to do to get to the next level. All right, so this is protocol D8. I'm reading from chapter 4 of my book. All right, so here's what the class D player said to me. Quote, he says, I could play knight takes c6. It's messy. The bishop at e7 is vulnerable. After knight takes d5, he could play bishop takes d5. If instead he plays knight takes d5, then I play bishop takes e7. After knight takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, e takes d5. Is that good? I'm isolating his d-pawn. Are there other weaknesses? If I play one b4 first, that loosens c3. If I play one knight takes c6, that wins the bishop pair. Is the knight stronger than the bishop? The bishop on c6 hits g2, so it's a good idea to win the bishop pair. He can take back with the rook, no problem. All right, I'll play one knight takes c6. I'm looking for a better move. No, knight takes c6, push the clock. All right, and that was 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a little fast for a de Groot. And you can see he didn't say a lot in the 5 minutes. A lot of people who take 5 minutes say a lot more words than that, but there was some silence in there. Okay, so here's what I say about that particular protocol. Now remember, I've talked about this particular position over and over again throughout the book, so I'm not trying to keep going through the same things. I say, before giving a de Groot exercise to my students, I almost always make sure they do understand the value of the bishop pair. As we have seen, according to Grandmaster Larry Kaufman, the bishop pair is worth, on the average, about a half a pawn bonus. In de Groot A, one can win the bishop pair with knight takes c6. Yet most weak players don't even mention that candidate move, much less actually play it like this guy did. So a lot of credit goes to subject d8, who, although he did not look for a better move, at least chose one resulting in something positive. It would have been much better to thoroughly analyze all the forcing moves to see if one was better than knight takes c6. And I might mention here, of course, he did mention knight takes d5 briefly, and we'll take a look at that. Like many other subjects, d8 did not perform an evaluation at the start. An evaluation meaning who stands better, how much better, and why. Nor did he look for his opponent's threats. For instance, he didn't notice that queen takes b2 was a move that he might have to consider. All right, so knight takes c6 might have been lucky in that he didn't notice that queen takes b2 or anything else was threatened. Now, I did mention this in another place in the book, but one of the things that this subject mentioned here was he said knight takes d5, bishop takes d5. He says if instead knight takes d5, then I have bishop takes e7. Well, what he's missing is he's making a visualization error here. After knight takes d5, he's saying black can't take with a knight because I can take the bishop. But what he's missing is that after knight takes d5, the knight is guarding the bishop. So if you play bishop takes e7, then black will simply play back knight takes e7, and you're not winning anything. So he immediately eliminated the move knight takes d5 for that reason. Now, what happens when you're playing chess and you analyze and you misanalyze like this and you get rid of a move because you think it's not possible when actually it is you could come to all the wrong conclusions, because you could then therefore assume that knight takes d5 is not a good move for black, and therefore maybe the position is better for white than you think it is because he's not able to play certain moves that actually he can play. So you have to be very careful when you're eliminating moves. You want to always question that. If you say someone can't do something for a certain reason, especially if you're looking more than one move deep where you have to visualize 2 or 3 ply, then you want to take your time and really make sure that you're right about it. So here, knight takes d5 is certainly possible. And now if white plays bishop takes d5, a move that very, very few people under the rating of about 1900 or 2000 look at, then you are removing the guard, and he can't take back on d5 because he does lose the bishop. So therefore, the only way that black can get his piece back is to recapture on bishop takes g5. And it turns out this is one of the key positions for de Groot A. And as I said, I've given de Groot A to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, most of whom were rated under 2000. And I would say no more than a handful ever got to this position, even though this is a crucial position for evaluating de Groot A. You really need to get here. And all the grandmasters got to this position. And, they had to go further here because the position is hardly quiescent here, and it's not clear at all who's better. So it took them a little bit of time to figure out what's going on here. But that turns out to be a key line, and you're always looking for your checks, captures, and threats. Well, clearly knight takes d5 is a capture, so it's a candidate move, and clearly black cannot play queen takes b2 because he needs to recapture the piece. So knight takes d5 is a major candidate, and black has 3 ways of recapturing, and you have to figure out how good each one is because black's going to do that, and black's going to play the best one for him. And knight takes d5, if you're going to evaluate it, remember my video on chess logic that I made a few weeks ago, if you're going to evaluate knight takes d5, how good is knight takes d5? Well, it's as good as black's best move allows it to be, because your move is only as good as the PV, which assumes best moves for both sides. So if you don't know what's his best recapture, bishop takes, pawn takes, or knight takes, then you're not going to be able to tell how good knight takes d5 is, because knight takes d5 is as good as his best recapture allows it to be. And you'd have to figure that out as part of doing Degree A. Anyway, that's the kind of thing that I do in the book, The Improving Chess Thinker. We'll go back to get my cover again. There it is. The Improving Chess Thinker. This is the second edition. Make sure if you buy the greatly expanded second edition, don't buy a used copy of the first edition unless you want to just save a lot of money. Because when I do a new edition of things, I really try to improve them greatly. I don't just do some cosmetic things that you would do for a new printing, like fix errors or something. I actually rearranged the table of contents for this book, and I thought maybe the second edition was a more logical way to show it. I added a whole bunch of new protocols that I hadn't shown in the first book. So I highly recommend you get this red cover one rather than the gray cover on the first one, grayish blue cover. Get the second edition of The Improving Chess Thinker, and it'll help you show not only how other people think, but of course there's all those other chapters on helping you think better as well. Alright, so for my YouTube channel, please, again, tell your friends about Dan Heisman Chess. That's the name of my YouTube channel. It's the best way to get the information out there. I have stuff on almost every aspect of improving your chess game. I have over 220 videos now. I've got openings, middle games, end games, thought process, time management, common mistakes, all kinds of stuff, of everything you'd want to do about chess improvement. So please tell your friends about the channel. If you'd like to like the video, I appreciate it. If you want to subscribe to the channel, great, do that too. And we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.